Hello and welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. Well, we're a week closer to the 2022 Six Nations, and today we'll be taking a look at some of the major squad selections from the past week. England opted to leave George Ford out of their initial 36-man squad, but it looks like he might well be offered a way back by Eddie Jones because Owen Farrell has suffered another injury setback. We'll discuss Ford's return to the setup as well as some of the other major selections made by Jones with the Telegraph's Ben Coles. Scotland have named a strong squad. In fact, it's one of the strongest I can remember for the Six Nations. They've got a curtain raiser with England, and the 39-man selection includes a number of new faces, some of whom have represented England before. Head coach Gregor Townsend said that they are all in contention to play in the opening fixture, and we'll discuss the Scots in detail today with my co-host Rory Lawson. Elsewhere, we'll get Rory's take on some of the other squad headlines from around the Six Nations. We'll be discussing the new deal between Premiership Rugby and ITV, and we will round off the final round of pool games in the Champions Cup and discuss the lineups for the quarter-finals too. It's been a strange year in the Champions Cup, well, and the Challenge Cup as well, because the tables, for once, they do lie. They really do. Normally, when you come near the top, you expect an easy fixture. You don't expect to lose the reigning champions, or Bordeaux Begler, who are top of the top 14. Anyway, I'm delighted to welcome back alongside me the former Scotland scrum half, Rory Lawson. Hi, Rory.
Hi, Brian. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Pool stages, all wrapped up in the knockout stages for the European Champions Cup. If you want a quick rundown, it's Clement Auvergne versus Tigers, Bordeaux Begler against La Rochelle, Connacht versus Leinster, tasty, Exeter Chiefs versus Munster, Montpellier versus Harlequins, Sale versus Bristol, Stade Francais versus Racing 92, and Toulouse versus Ulster. Been a bit of a logistical mess, but now we do find out we've got some tasty games. What do you make of the way the tournament's been handled in general? Bearing in mind, we do have to give them some latitude because it's been another COVID-ravaged year.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think Omicron just added to it, didn't it, with the rapid spread of it. But I think to be able to get to the stage whereby you have a last 16 knockout stage in this championship, in the competition, is progress, and at least you've got home and away fixtures which are really interesting. I think it's strange for me that you end up with a couple of last 16 ties with two French sides. Yeah. You've got the All Irish, Connacht Leinster, you've got Sale Bristol. So typically you'd have cross nation matches when it came to the knockout stages. On this occasion it's a little bit different, but I suppose that might happen when everything comes out in the wash in the final eight. Yeah, I mean, one of the difficulties, and I was writing about this, was even when you look at the final table placings, you see Leicester won by 1, 3 and 6 points respectively in the three games they did play. They didn't play the fourth game. So how do you do that? Leinster whacked two sides, but then again, the side that they put nearly 60 points on, Bath, have conceded 70 points 3 times this year. Clement Auvergne, they put 89 on, were a side. Was it Montpellier? I can't remember. Montpellier could have progressed without winning a game.
I know.
which is astounding. But then it's kind of where we are, isn't it? I think realistically, you'll be pleased that Leinster obviously came out on the back end of a decided loss because of COVID. Yes. But you'll be pleased that we've not lost really any of the big teams because of that, which is something that we can be thankful for, albeit, as a result, you've ended up having some teams seeded lower than they may otherwise have been. But there was some cracking action at the weekend. There are some real individuals and teams on form. It will now take the break into the Six Nations, and then off the back of the Six Nations, we'll get into this last 16.
I mean, it's always a fool's game to do this, so I'm going to let you go first on this. As to which sides looked, the business and which didn't.
You can't look too far past Leinster when you're talking about looking the business. I just thought they were so ruthless, so efficient, so effective, so cohesive in everything that they did.
Great bench to bring on as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think, we'll get into talking Six Nations in due course, but I actually think the Irish provinces across the board are playing some absolutely sensational rugby.
I don't know if this is true, but if it isn't, I hope it isn't. I hope that they've got it. Because I said several years ago, the way for Scotland, Ireland, and Wales in particular to gain an advantage on England and France, who are constantly at war with their clubs, is for the coaches, the head coaches, to go to the head coaches of the provincial or regional or club sides and say, right, let's all work together. You'll get better at these things. You're not going to get relegated because that's never against you. So let's work together and develop a style of rugby that we think will succeed at both levels. And it seems to me, whether it's been done on purpose, I don't know, but that is very much the way it's moving in Ireland, certainly.
Well, you say that, but I think, Johan van Graan at Munster does play a very different style to Leinster. Andy Friend at Connacht plays a really wide, expansive style of play there. And then obviously Ulster are, also playing some fairly expansive stuff. I think when you have a side of the significance of Leinster in the URC and in Europe, with the playmakers in those positions, you look at the halfbacks, the back rowers, you can build a team around the front five. You can build a team around that skill set, and then you can slot some of the Munster guys in, the Ulster guys who are going to get the nod. But undoubtedly, I think what they've been allowed to do is build that platform through Leinster, who just have such an embarrassment of riches coming through the school system, the academy system, and Irish rugby as a result is in a really good place. And they keep all of their players in Ireland playing their rugby there. Even guys like Simon Zebo leave and desperate to go back because he wants another bit of a taste of trophies ultimately. So I think they're onto a good thing, and they certainly came out really strongly from the pool stages.
And in contrast, no Welsh representation in the knockout phases of the Champions Cup. 11 matches played in the 2 European tournaments. 11 defeats suffered by Cardiff Scarlets, Dragons, Ospreys. Now, we have to revisit this because it doesn't look good. And I've been writing about this for 10, 12 years and saying they need to sort the regions out because at some point it will affect the national team. But at the moment, the talent seems to be coming through irrespective of this. So maybe we have to accept that, all right, they don't perform here, but that's not going to stop them elsewhere.
I think they've been really fortunate in Wales that the national team have done so well in recent years under Warren Gatland, and I think as a result it's managed to kind of paper over some cracks there at regional level. Europe, the URC or the Pro 14 in its previous guise, I think it's provided them with a platform to be protected from ultimately the national team's successes are all that the people of Wales really care about.
Yeah.
Now that could be exposed, and this could be the year whereby things, properly those cracks start opening. When you look at
they've got a lot of the injuries, haven't they?
The injuries, and their opening to the championship. They've got to go to Dublin to the Aviva against Ireland, and if they don't get things right there, they could be on the wrong end of something. Then Scotland go down to Cardiff in that second week, and they're relying on the crowd and some proper leaders in that squad stepping up. So this could be the season, but it's hugely disappointing for the Welsh regions to be so unsuccessful in Europe. And you can't get away from the injuries that they've been hit by, but you'd argue that if the rule wasn't in place to keep the Welsh internationalists in Wales, then
even worse.
It would be even worse. There would be players looking all over Europe for further opportunities.
Well, England named their squad for the 2022 Six Nations last week, and it, just like the autumn series, excluded a number of experienced players. However, it looks like Leicester's George Ford is set to return. Why don't we discuss this with Ben Coles, the Telegraph rugby correspondent. Hi, Ben.
Hi there, Brian.
Interesting. I thought that it would turn out this way. I didn't realise that Owen Farrell might not be available for the whole of the series. In some ways, does that not make Eddie Jones's task a bit simpler if Farrell's not there?
I guess it does in a way, because it's been the main selection debate, hasn't it, for the last few weeks or even months, in terms of what England do with this midfield combination and what the best sort of way to go about it is. Eddie Jones back in the autumn said that he really wanted to see Marcus Smith playing alongside Owen Farrell at 10 and 12, and he hasn't really had the opportunity to do that, really. on account of Farrell getting injured with that ankle and whatever this new injury is that we're still waiting the specifics of. I think the current estimate is potentially that he's going to be out for 8 weeks, which is the bulk of the Six Nations, obviously.
Yeah.
If not for the whole thing, once the specialist sort of makes a decision on the state of his ankle. So it leaves us in a fascinating situation where England sort of need to work out who's going to be inside centre and outside centre again, outside potentially Marcus Smith or maybe even George Ford, if George Ford is indeed coming back to the squad, which it sounds like he is.
Have you heard any rumours about the potential lineups in those areas?
I think the debate at the moment is whether you try and replicate, if you go down the Marcus Smith route, and I think it's fair to say that if they deviated from Marcus Smith at this point, given he's done very little wrong in the autumn and actually he's played rather well, it would probably feel like a bit of a backward step, and as though they'd be reverting to sort of a previous plan under Eddie Jones. So I think if you're going to keep Marcus Smith at 10, which they should, then you almost want to try and give him the best possible setup, sort of compared to what he has at Harlequins and what he does so well. And there, as we know, he's got Andre Esterhazen outside him, an inside centre, who's a massive lump of an inside centre who gets over the gain line and helps bail him out of trouble. And it's just a great outlet for him when he needs to get momentum. Now the best way of doing that, I guess, if you're England, is probably Mark Atkinson of Gloucester, who England haven't used that much, but he fits the same sort of size model, and he sort of has that same power and offloading game. He's the most obvious fit at 12, but otherwise, in terms of who they're going to pick, the fact that Manu Tuilagi isn't available yet, and we're not sure for how long, you could see any number of combinations. You could see Henry Slade move to 12. You could see a combination of Slade and Marchant. You could even see a first cap for Luke Northmore, who's been named in the squad, who plays with Smith at Harlequins. So I think there's actually not a lot of clarity at the moment in terms of what we're going to see, because the injuries have really disrupted England's plans, and not having Farrell takes away what Eddie Jones hoped to see with Smith and him combined in midfield.
I'm interested in your views. Just bring it back to Owen Farrell. I've always felt that Owen Farrell is such a prominent and dominant leader within that England squad that they may be left a little bit exposed for leadership. Ultimately, is he a single point failure within that squad? Obviously, Courtney Lawes has been discussed as taking over from Owen Farrell, but I'm interested on your views with regards to who England will look to lead this team forward, and whether potentially this could expose an over-reliance on Owen Farrell historically.
Yeah, I absolutely think it could. I think Farrell's sort of reputation at the moment is... the reaction to him is fascinating, because he seems to either have people in one camp who are massive supporters of him, or people who seem to think that he's slowing England down and that he needs to make way. He's the proper Marmite rugby player at the moment. And so I think maybe this might be a case of over the next few weeks, England will realise what they're missing without him there, because he's such a driver of standards. He's such an impressive leader, as we've seen over the years for Saracens and with England. Even if people don't think he's necessarily playing his best rugby, he's an absolutely essential leader. And so, yeah, Courtney Lawes is going to be key. Ben Youngs is going to be key. I think they're looking to Tom Curry as sort of the future of captaincy and leadership in that back row role. And while he's still quite a young player and developing, he is emerging as one of England's world-class players. And I think a lot will be put on him as well to try and lead this side forward too. But I mean, yeah, there's a lot of pressure on Courtney Lawes in a sense to carry on as he did in the autumn and to lead this side well, certainly over the next few weeks while Farrell's away. But
I fear for England in this sense. They've got a very difficult away fixture to start with at Murrayfield. They're coming off an autumn series in which they did better than I thought, and I think many people thought they would do. And yet, given the uncertainties around 10, 12, and in fact all over the back line, to be honest, the Curry experiment at 8, they are close to getting something really right, or it going not right at all, and then setting them back quite a way. And as you know, with England, if it does go wrong, the media will descend on them in a way that they don't quite do on other sides. And it has always been the case in the Six Nations, Rory, I'm sure will agree, is the mantra is absolute, because if you win the first game, you can then do things under your own in your own time and what have you. If you don't, you're under pressure straight away, because one more loss and that's it. You're out. You're not going to win, and everything is fighting fires. So it's such a huge game to start with. What's your feeling? Is there a confident feeling that you get around the camp?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much pressure on England just because another fifth place finish is completely unacceptable, isn't it? Given the resources they have, given the depth of talent that they have, and they seem to have sort of bounced between either winning the title over the last few years or coming fifth in the Six Nations, which isn't going to be good enough. And there is so much pressure on them as a result of that. The midfield is an issue. Maybe even the wings are an issue as well, because watching Johnny May recently, I'm not sure he's been in his best form for Gloucester, and Anthony Watson isn't there on the other wing, so there's changes to be made there. I think Eddie Jones loves having a target in terms of the World Cup and sort of counting down the tournaments until he gets to that point and talking about developing the side over these next few games. But this is a vital tournament, because I think if they come fifth again, I'm not saying that Jones's job is going to be under pressure with the World Cup so close, but they're going to start losing. The fans are going to start losing faith in their processes and what they're trying to attempt, and I think that's the last thing England need at the moment, given that the Six Nations last year was so disappointing.
It's a classic case of the Six Nations momentum, isn't it? That opening game up at Murrayfield, because obviously off the back of it they go to Rome on the second round on the Sunday, and then welcome Wales to Twickenham for that third game. So that opening fixture is so important for Eddie Jones and his squad, and building confidence, building momentum.
It is for Gregor as well, but because let's face it, Scotland have one of the strongest squads I can remember on paper, and yet again the Six Nations tournament happens so quickly that they're disproportionately important losses, aren't they? It takes 1 out of 5 games, but if it's your first one, it almost feels like 1.5, and then you're staring over the edge.
Oh, Brian, you don't need to tell me as a Scotsman about momentum in the Six Nations. For so often in recent years, Scotland have come out of a good autumn and a positive start of the year with players on form, and have struggled in that opening game. And as a result, you're clawing yourself back into the championship. But yeah, I think for Gregor, it's great to start with a home game, and I think, having the fans back at BT Murrayfield, there'll be an extra edge, an extra confidence. Gregor's recent record against England is strong, and I think he has picked a squad that is full of players on form, and will go into that game very, very respectful of what England can bring to BT Murrayfield, but equally without necessarily potentially the fear that may have run through in years gone by.
Let's just ask Ben one more question before we let him go. 6 new faces in the squad: Orlando Bailey, Alfie Barbary, Ollie Chesham, Tommy Freeman, Ollie Hassel-Collins and Luke Northmore. How realistic is it we'll see any of these, do you think?
That's a very good point, because we've sort of seen Eddie select these uncapped players in previous squads, and they've spent a lot of time training in camp without seeing a lot of action, haven't they? I know Tommy Freeman was in the squad in November and didn't get to see any game time, so you would sort of hope that he might edge a bit closer. You'd hope that Alfie Barbary might get a go. I think the way that he's been playing for Wasps recently, I know he missed their game against Munster on the weekend, but the power he offers, I know England have a lot of powerful sort of back row forwards, but he is quite special. You would hope to see him involved. Luke Northmore, as I said earlier, given the potential for his centre combination with Marcus Smith, maybe Jones will want to sort of fast track him in just to have that option there. The one I really wonder about is Ollie Hassel-Collins on the wing, just because I'm not sure, like I said earlier, I'm not sure May's in the best form, and I just wonder whether England will want something a bit different. And what Hassel-Collins does so well, given his size, he's about 6'4", still developing, he's about 23 years old, but he's so good at getting over the gain line and so good at giving London Irish sort of go forward in their counter-attacks. I just wonder whether England might try and look at him there to see if they can use him to just play that sort of big winger role that they hoped to see Joe Coppin-Seager do a few months ago, or about a year ago, before he got injured. So he's maybe certainly one to keep an eye on. I'm not sure about Orlando Bailey, whether he'll get much game time, especially now that Ford is about to link up with the squad.
Sorry, I've got another one before you go.
That's fine.
The Premiership Rugby final, for the first time this season, is going to be shown live on terrestrial television. The deal is part of a new deal with ITV. We'll also see returned to free-to-air weekly highlights, which is good for Dave Flatman. I like Dave. How big a boost to rugby in general do you think this is?
Yeah, it seems enormous, doesn't it? I actually flicked through the Sky TV guide earlier today just to sort of see it listed, just to believe it. And yeah, there it is for Sunday, sort of ITV in that primetime slot. I think it's building on what seems to be a trend with the BT Sport viewing figures, which seem to be on the rise actually over the last season or two, based on what Premiership Rugby have been telling us. And now I think the fact that you're going to be showcasing these games live to a national audience, I think is massive. The final especially. Yeah. Because often you might get the odd sort of Premiership in-season game, and that would attract people to a paid subscription service. But actually having the final itself, I mean, if we think back to the final last season that we had between Harlequins and Exeter, which was an absolute riot, really, with so many tries and points scored. If you're then getting millions tuning into that, then it's absolutely fantastic, and it comes at a time when the sport sort of needs more input and investment and more fans getting interested in the game. I guess the only caveat is you don't want to take spectators away from the grounds because they can watch it on TV. So next season, when they're showing 7 regular season games and the final, I guess they'll just have to make sure they spread the games around the clubs so that clubs aren't overly affected in terms of attendances. But no, it's a brilliant move, and it comes at a really important time for the game.
Ben, thank you very much for joining us. Interesting as always. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, thank you.
Well, let's just briefly return to the epic opener, which is a Calcutta Cup fixture. You've got both England and France at home. This time round, irrespective of the strength of those two teams, with the team and the squad you've got, is it realistic? Would you accept anything less than the two wins there?
I think every time Scotland play at BT Murrayfield now, it's sort of, they go into it believing that they can and they should win. And I think this year is going to be special when you've got capacity crowds back in. I know that Murrayfield's been sold out for months now when it comes to these two fixtures, and we've got the clarity that they'll be going ahead with packed out grounds, and it'll be special. I think that opening weekend, the late kickoff on the Saturday in darkness under the lights at Murrayfield, with the fans will have a few.
They've had a good day on it, won't they?
Exactly. So I think it'll be a really, really special atmosphere. And I think Scotland now expects this, the depth and quality of squad now, that the fans do expect Scotland to win their home games. And when you look at the way that Scotland's fixtures have fallen for this season, if they can get that win against England in the opener and potentially be going down to Cardiff, to try and back up their first win in Wales for 20 plus years with another win, it would be a big start for Scotland. But it's always a tough one to call. I've been made to look like a fool on many occasions going into Six Nations. So
just ask this one: what's happened with Adam Hastings? Because at one point he was seeming to me to be looked at as a contender for Finn Russell's place, and now he's not in the squad at the moment.
It's a really interesting one. I don't think Adam has been in particularly poor form at Gloucester.
No, I don't think he has.
At all. I think he's had some really good games. He's been starting there, and I think for me the challenge that's come is that Finn Russell's nailed on starter, and therefore Gregor is looking to who he's going to bring off the bench. And I'm surprised that he doesn't have Finn and Adam and another 10 in the squad. And as it is, it's Blair Kinghorn who's going to be likely to be on the bench to cover 10, to cover wing, to cover 15. I guess if I'm looking at it, with Blair's ability to play right across the back line, he potentially can pick a squad with 6-2 split on the bench and know that he's got the bases covered in the back, so long as he doesn't pick up.
And that is a bit of a de rigueur thing at the moment, 6-2, isn't it? But a lot of people, are saying you really do need that bulk all around, because if you fall down there, it doesn't matter what you have outside.
Yeah, and I think also when you look at the makeup of the other players in the squad, that maybe looks, you maybe have the opportunity to put Rory Darge on the bench as an out-and-out open-side scavenger, who wouldn't otherwise get a spot because he's an out-and-out open side. You could put him on the bench, potentially a back row, second row option, and ultimately load your bench up with forwards, because you know that against England, you're going to have that power in the final 20 coming off the bench. Against France, you're going to have real power coming off the bench. In order to stay in the fight and win these games, you need to be in it for 80. And I think that's maybe what's pushed Gregor into this decision. But it's a really tough call for Adam Hastings, because he's done well in that Scotland jersey in the past few seasons.
Gregor Townsend, well, he's been in charge now since 2017. He's going to see the side through to the World Cup in 2023 next year. How would you assess his performance? And would you know, if they don't make significant dents in the... I don't think that his job would be predicated on winning the World Cup, because Scotland have not been near to doing that. But get a decent showing in that. Is he the more sort of man? I mean, he's very young still. To give another 4 years too.
Gregor's an excellent coach. I question, at any level of any professional sport, the length of time that a single coach can be in place as the head guy. Obviously, Alex Ferguson's a great example of turning over the first team coach while he managed, and he'd do that regularly. You don't see that done all that much in rugby. Warren Gatlin's probably a real exception to the rule. You look at the way the All Blacks rotate coaches in and out. Gregor is an excellent coach, and as you say, he is a young coach. I think he will be measured on the Rugby World Cup, and when you look at the pool again, for Scotland, South Africa and Ireland in that pool, I think getting out the pool is a success given that group, and particularly based on the experiences of Japan 2019, when Scotland tumbled their way out of the Rugby World Cup. I think based on recent history, he had a good Six Nations last year. He's had a relatively good autumn, albeit the South Africa game was really disappointing, because Scotland didn't challenge the world champions and were almost predictably suffocated by them.
Yeah.
But I think this is going to be a championship whereby we'll hopefully find out that Scotland are continuing to be on this upward curve under Gregor Townsend, and that he has depth now in that squad that very, very few Scottish coaches have been able to enjoy for a long time.
Slightly briefer on the analysis of Ireland and Wales, and we touched on that a little bit anyway when we were talking about their provinces and regional sized performances in the European Cup and how that might translate. Ireland at the moment, they are just chock full of talent. They seem to be developing in a way that Andy Farrell wanted them to do. I suppose for them, the way the fixtures fall, I think is reasonable for them. And I would say for the Farrell shouldn't accept anything less than a title shot. Now, whether he gets the title, or whether he comes second, I would think the way it's fallen for them that he should be realistically looking for one or the other.
Yeah, I think Andy Farrell's squad, they came off the back of a really impressive Autumn Nation series. They knocked over the All Blacks again. They're brimming with confidence. The provinces are flying. They've got to go to Twickenham. And do they have to go to Paris as well?
Yes, they do, yes.
They've got to go to Paris. Those are two really tough trips for Ireland. I think France go into this championship marginal favourites over everybody, but Ireland, are an outstanding team who they'll take some beating. Yeah.
Let's briefly recap on Wales. Given the injury situation, the way they're going into this, no one wants to finish mid-table. No one wants to do that. But I would be surprised if they are title contenders, and if they do manage to do what they've done several other times when people have not rated them either. If they were to get near that, it would be an extraordinary achievement, I think.
How many times have we underestimated Wales and written them off going to championships, and they've ended up winning them a lot? But I'm not sure I've seen an injury list like this before. When you take...
Well, it's the importance of them, isn't it? It's not just a number.
No, it's absolutely not just a number. When you look through Alan Wynne-Jones, George North, Halfpenny, Owens, Navidi, Tipperick, Faletau, I mean, those are all British and Irish Lions, all outstanding leaders, all guys that have been there, done that. They have the winners' T-shirts. I think it's a huge challenge for them. the one thing on their side, they have 3 home games.
Yep.
But if they start with a battering in Dublin, which many good sides will have gone to Dublin and been on the end of a battering, it could be a long old championship for Wayne Pivac's side.
Yeah, I know. Okay, like the French, we think we agree that they are favourites. They start with the very nice opener of Italy at home. They have England as their final game at home, if it turns out to be a Grand Slam or a title-winning ending. And you can't say much about what the sides have done in Europe because they've been COVID-ridden, and a lot of them have just not been. Well, they're not even been playing. But when you see what those people who have been playing, the players who have been playing, are doing, and you look at the autumn, they're still immensely powerful throughout the squad, aren't they? And they have not necessarily interchangeable starting 15s and benches, but they're not far off. Whatever 6 or whatever come off the bench, you can't see much diminution in the final product, can you?
No, they're high quality. It's the depth that Fabien Galtier has, even with injuries, the confidence, the brand of rugby that they're playing. Obviously, Dupont pulling the strings, even without Olivon as captain, he fell into that.
Just tell me about Dupont, because your view of him.
He's a phenomenon. He is now the scrum half that every ambitious scrum half will want to be like. I just think he is, the way that he plays the game, both sides of the ball, his skill set, his basic skill set is outstanding for starters, which any scrum half to be spoken about must have. But he's gone beyond the likes of Aaron Smith, who was widely viewed as having the best service in the world. His service isn't as good, but because he has such a threat, he's got a fend, a piston-like fend that can get him away from much bigger men. His pace off the mark, his support lines, his kicking game is outstanding, and he's combative. And I just think he has it all, but he's also got this cool head on him that a lot of French nines who haven't had his skill set have had, but with the skill set he brings to play, he brings the best out in others. And I just think there are a few, I'm short of superlatives that actually sum up how good a player Dupont is.
Well, we can deal with Italy very quickly, and I'm not being dismissive, but just it's not. We go for this every year. You can't see them winning a game, only see them damage limitation. It's a shame. I'm still supportive of their case for the Six Nations, but I'm not supportive of them staying in forever, and I am supportive of there being some mechanism whereby, whether it's every 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or whatever, whether it's home and away against the top of the European second tier, where there is an automatic right for demotion and promotion.
Yeah, I think for Italy, they have a good under-20 system. They are bringing players through. Rugby in general, the numbers have dropped off through COVID, actually, and I saw some terrifying stats the other day, rugby in general. But I think they're continuing to try and reel themselves back in against the other professional outfits. At the end of the day, every team's getting better. So Italy need to get better twice as quick. And quite how they do that, I'm not sure. The positive, Benetton won the inaugural Rainbow Cup last year. They are starting to win games in the URC, which is building those experiences. But we all know the step up from domestic rugby into international rugby ruthlessly exposes even the slightest frailties. And I think Italy have a long way to go.
OK, before we finish, a few questions. Rugby inside line, ITV Prem deal. Don't want to be greedy, but, well, they are going on to be greedy. Wouldn't it be great if the semi-finals were thrown in too, in order to develop the storyline a bit more? Imagine the repeat of Bristol Quins, followed by Exeter Quins. Yes, you're right, it would be. But you only get so much for your buck, and I'm glad the deal that's been done has been done, because, at least that is starting somewhere. So, yes, you are being greedy. And no, they won't do that. One for you, Connor. The next steps have to be better coverage of a championship, the scrapping of the Premier Cup for a new trophy with championships in it. Strength of English rugby lies in the existence of a pyramid.
Oof, I think you'd have a lot of people competing against that. I think the gap between Premiership and Championship is ever widening. I think finance is a big factor within that, and I don't see that changing, I'm afraid. I think, sadly, it's the way that the rugby is going. The Premiership Cup continues to have its place. It's a good opportunity for the wider squads, but I think it would be there's not going to be the giant killing of the FA Cup if you put Championship teams in with the Premiership teams.
Just a final word on this, and I know it's not popular in the grassroots game. I support the grassroots game totally, but on an amateur basis. And the problem with the Championship is it's a mess. You've got some teams that might be wanting to be pro, some teams that are happy being semi-pro, some teams that are barely semi-pro, and the whole thing, it's not a consistent offering. You get huge mismatches. Very few games, I think, would stand up to scrutiny. There would be empty grounds, a lot of them, or they'd go from the few thousand at Bedford to a few hundred, and therefore, for a broadcaster, it's a non-starter. Broadcasters will not touch it, and you can't force them to do that. So I'm sorry, I think the strength of the English game should lie, in the feeder system, and actually sorting out the grassroots level, so we're not paying players who don't deserve to earn any money out of it. Final one, Simon, Owen Farrell. We have experience of undercooked Sarries players coming international. Have the lessons been learned? Well, I would just say this. If Owen's got an injury that might keep him out a couple of months, I can see no reason at all to rush him back or even take any sort of gamble to play him in one game. It seems pointless to me, completely and utterly pointless. If he's going to miss the other one, let the squad have a Farrell-free existence for and see how it goes. Because then we really will see, like Ben Coe said, if we are underestimating what he does, we will see this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really tricky one. It's not just exclusive to England either. I think Sean Maitland's missed out on Scotland selection. Has that year in the Championship knocked a few of those guys back with regards to sharpness or form? That's to be questioned. But I think when you see an England squad, Farrell obviously injured. When you look at both Vunipola's perhaps a little bit short of fitness and form. I think
Gailey
now
well, yeah.
Eddie Jones, credit to him, has selected on form. He's put the cat amongst the pigeons and certainly got some people talking about selections. He's a fan of doing that anyway. But I think this is going to be a real learning curve, a continued learning curve for this England squad without Owen Farrell. And I think looking at it from a potential opponent's perspective, Could this really take England on to another level, or will it hold them back without Farrell? We'll wait and see. Time will tell. But when you look at a side's attacking threat and the people that might operate in that midfield, there's a lot to keep your eye on.
Well, that's all we have time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. A big thanks to my co-host Rory Lawson and to my guest Ben Coates for joining me. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can check out all our previous episodes by subscribing to the Full Contact podcast channel, including my recent sit-down with England head coach Eddie Jones. We'll be back next week when we hope to be speaking to one of the members of the England squad, and I'll be joined by the former England centre Tom May. But until then, it's goodbye.